June 6, 1944. Deep within the Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler's East Prussian headquarters, an air of tense anticipation hung heavy in the bunker. News had just arrived. Allied forces were landing on the beaches of Normandy. But for Hitler and the German High Command, this was not the main event. This was merely a diversion, a feint. The real blow, the decisive invasion, was still to come. They believed, aimed at the Paddick allies. The conviction was absolute, and it rested almost entirely on the intelligence provided by a network of agents. Among them, one stood out as exceptionally reliable, consistently delivering information of critical importance. This agent, codenamed Arabelle by the German intelligence service, the Abwehr, was their most trusted source in Britain. His reports detailed vast, phantom armies assembling in southeast England, poised to strike across the narrowest part of the Channel. But Arabelle was a fiction. The vast armies were ghosts, and the man behind them was not a loyal Nazi spy, but an unassuming Spanish chicken farmer and hotel manager, a double agent of extraordinary genius, working for the British. His name was Juan Pujol García, and to the Allies, he was known as Agent Garbo. This is the story of how one man, with no prior experience in espionage, no military training, and no inherent gift for clandestine operations, managed to orchestrate perhaps the most successful deception in military history. It's a tale of audacious imagination, breathtaking risk, and a psychological warfare campaign that irrevocably altered the course of World War II. It raises a fundamental question. How could a single individual, armed with nothing but a typewriter and boundless creativity, so thoroughly blind one of the most ruthless intelligence apparatuses of the 20th century? Our story begins not in the shadowy backrooms of intelligence agencies, but in the sun-drenched, politically fractured landscape of Spain. Juan Pujol García was born in Barcelona in 1912 into a comfortably middle-class family. He was a curious, sensitive child, far more interested in books and adventure stories than the rigid social conventions of his time. He spent his youth flitting from one venture to another, managing a chicken farm, working in a hotel, even training as a film extra. He was, by his own admission, an utterly unremarkable man, prone to daydreaming and possessed of a vivid imagination. Yet, these very qualities, deemed unsuited for ordinary life, would become his greatest assets in a world plunged into war. Pujol's early life was profoundly shaped by the political turmoil engulfing Spain. He witnessed the rise of fascism and communism, the brutal Spanish Civil War. He served briefly and unwillingly on both sides, first with the Republicans, then briefly conscripted by the Nationalists. He saw firsthand the atrocities committed by both factions, the casual cruelty, the senseless destruction. This left him with a deep-seated revulsion for totalitarianism of any stripe. He emerged from the conflict with one burning conviction. He despised all forms of extremism, and he believed absolutely in the ideals of democracy, freedom, and individual liberty. He wanted to fight to make a difference, but he was no soldier. He believed the only way to safeguard the world from another descent into darkness was for Britain, the bastion of liberal democracy, to defeat Nazi Germany. With the outbreak of World War II, Pujol found himself in Lisbon, Portugal, a neutral city teeming with spies, refugees, and opportunists. He saw his chance. He resolved to offer his services to the British to help them defeat Hitler. This was his first great act of audacious self-belief, bordering on delusion. A man with no contacts, no training, no real understanding of espionage, simply decided he would become a spy. He approached the British embassy in Madrid, then in Lisbon, several times. Each time he was politely but firmly rejected. He was, after all, just a Spaniard with no discernible skills relevant to intelligence work. The British, quite rightly, saw him as a crackpot. But Pujol was persistent and cunning. If the British wouldn't take him, he reasoned, perhaps the Germans would. His plan was utterly astonishing in its simplicity and daring. He would offer to spy for the Germans, gain their trust, and then, armed with their credentials, he would finally be accepted by the British as a double agent. It was a gamble of extraordinary proportions, a high-wire act with death as the ultimate fall. This strategic dilemma defined his early efforts. If he failed to convince the Germans, he was merely a fantasist. If he convinced them too well, he risked being exposed by the British. In early 1941, Pujol successfully convinced a German agent in Madrid that he was a fanatical Nazi sympathizer. He fabricated a story about his fervent desire to contribute to the Nazi cause, fueled by his fictional disgust for democratic ideals. The Germans, eager for agents in Britain, were surprisingly receptive. Pujol proposed moving to England to establish a spy network, but his travel was delayed. Instead, he ended up in Lisbon, still masquerading as a German agent. This was the moment his genius for improvisation truly bloomed. From Lisbon, Pujol began to send reports to his German handlers. But these reports contained no genuine intelligence. How could they? He was in Portugal, not Britain. Instead, he consulted tourist guides, railway timetables, and public information films about Britain. He would listen to BBC radio news for details and then extrapolate, weaving elaborate, entirely fictitious narratives. For example, a BBC report on sugar rationing would become a detailed dispatch about the dire conditions of the British working class, their growing discontent, and how this reflected a deeper crisis of morale. He invented sources, complete with names, personalities, and professional backgrounds. He created a fictitious network of 11 agents, each with their own unique quirks and reporting styles. One of his earliest fictional agents, a supposedly fanatical Welsh Indian seaman, reported on British convoy movements. Pujol needed to explain why this seaman's intelligence was always slightly late, never quite actionable. He invented a cover story about the seaman's overwhelming seasickness whenever he attempted to sail. This detail, so human and so utterly plausible, endeared the agent to his German handlers. Pujol understood that details, even trivial ones, built credibility. He was creating a literary universe, a convincing alternate reality, piece by meticulous piece. His German controllers, increasingly impressed by the volume and apparent detail of his intelligence, began sending him actual secret writing materials, codes, and instructions for establishing contact with a new agent in London. This was the moment Pujol had been waiting for. With proof of German trust, he once again approached the British Embassy in Lisbon. This time, he was not dismissed. The sheer audacity of his initiative, the existence of his fabricated network, astonished the British intelligence officers, particularly the brilliant and eccentric Spanish-speaking MI5 officer, Tomás Harris. Harris was a painter, an art dealer, and an expert on Spanish culture. He immediately grasped the unique potential of Pujol. Seeing beyond the initial amateurishness to the extraordinary imagination at work, Harris became Pujol's handler, his collaborator, and his friend. Together, they refined Pujol's techniques. Pujol was given the codename Garbo, inspired by Greta Garbo, because like the famous actress, he was a master of acting and could never be what he seemed. The first major task for Garbo and Harris was to convince the Germans that Garbo had indeed arrived in Britain and was successfully establishing his network. This required a delicate dance of deception. Garbo would write letters and reports, postmarked from London, but in reality, they were sent via diplomatic bag from Lisbon to a trusted British contact who would mail them in London. He continued to feed the Germans seemingly vital intelligence, always carefully vetted by MI5 to be either utterly harmless, publicly available, or subtly misleading. One early challenge was explaining why none of Garbo's agents had managed to report on the day parade in August 1942. This was a significant Allied assault on the French coast, a bloody failure, but also a vital learning experience. The Germans would naturally expect their top spy network to have some forewarning. Garbo, with Harris's help, cooked up a magnificent explanation. His principal agent, he claimed, had suffered an unexpected illness, a debilitating bout of laryngitis, preventing him from communicating. Other agents were scattered, their reports delayed by communication difficulties and the general chaos of wartime. To further cement his credibility, Garbo reported the loss of one of his subagents who, he claimed, had patriotically attempted to reach the coast to report on the raid, only to be killed by a German bomb. The Germans, far from being suspicious, were deeply moved by this sacrifice and even offered to pay a pension to the fictitious agent's equally fictitious family. This unexpected outcome sealed their trust. Garbo's network began to grow. He meticulously crafted the lives of 27 fictional agents, each with distinct personalities, political leanings, and job descriptions. There was Arabo, the principal agent himself, a supposedly fanatical pro-Nazi Spanish businessman. Then came Arabo's sub-agents, Benito, a disgruntled waiter in a military officer's mess, privy to canteen gossip; Dagobert, a right-wing Venezuelan student, reporting on anti-British sentiment; Leopoldo, a seaman who supposedly passed information about naval convoys; Fred, an American soldier disillusioned with the British, providing insights into troop morale; even a pro-Nazi Welsh nationalist and a Gibraltarian dock worker. Each agent had their own specific reporting style, their own concerns, their own level of access to information. Garbo would vary the language, the tone, and even the spelling errors to reflect each agent's persona. He understood that a real network would be imperfect, riddled with human error and inconsistencies. This sophisticated approach made his fictional world incredibly convincing. The logistics of managing this elaborate charade were immense. Garbo and Harris would spend hours brainstorming, crafting detailed reports, and then translating them into rudimentary German. Harris's art studio became their operational headquarters, filled with maps, reference books, and the quiet hum of their creativity. They invented backstories for the agents, complete with fake addresses and even expenses. Garbo would receive actual funds from the Germans to pay his fictional network, which were then used by MI5 for the war effort, a particularly satisfying irony. The Germans, now completely convinced, believed Garbo's network was producing intelligence of immense value. They began to use his reports to conform other sources and to inform their strategic decisions. They had fallen into a classic intelligence trap: confirmation bias. Garbo would occasionally send a genuinely important piece of information, carefully timed to be too late to be actionable, but demonstrating his access. For example, he reported on an Allied convoy sailing from Liverpool. The Germans, once they confirmed the convoy had indeed sailed, interpreted Garbo's slightly delayed report as proof of his network's effectiveness, rather than a clever manipulation. As the war progressed, the Allies began planning the largest amphibious invasion in history: Operation Overlord, the landing in Normandy. The success of Overlord hinged not just on overwhelming force, but on overwhelming deception. The Germans had to be convinced that the main invasion would come elsewhere, at Pas de Calais, holding back their vital reserves. This monumental task, codenamed Operation Fortitude, became the ultimate test of Garbo's ingenuity. Operation Fortitude was divided into two main parts: Fortitude North, designed to convince the Germans of an invasion of Norway, and Fortitude South, the crucial component for D-Day, designed to convince them of an attack on Pas de Calais. The plan involved a complex orchestration of visual, radio, and human deception. Fictitious army units were created, complete with inflatable tanks, dummy landing craft, and barracks full of empty uniforms. Radio operators transmitted fake signals traffic, mimicking the communications patterns of an enormous army group. But the most vital component, the psychological linchpin, was Garbo. His mission was to report on the existence, strength, and intentions of the 1st U.S. Army Group, or FUSAG. This was a phantom army, supposedly commanded by the formidable General George S. Patton, widely feared by the Germans. FUSAG was located in Kent and Sussex, the counties directly opposite Pas de Calais. Garbo's job was to fill his reports with meticulous details about this non-existent force. From late 1943 through early 1944, Garbo's reports became increasingly detailed and urgent. He described the arrival of vast numbers of American troops, their training exercises, the buildup of supplies, the construction of new airfields, and the constant movement of vehicles. He even manufactured reports about minor disciplinary incidents within Fusag, lending an air of authenticity and demonstrating his agents' supposed deep integration within the units. His reports were so convincing that the Germans began to identify Fusag on their own intelligence maps, accepting its existence as undisputed fact. They believed Garbo was giving them the crucial, granular detail that no other source could provide. The challenge for Garbo and Harris was to create a narrative that was both convincing and ultimately misleading. They had to ensure that his reports painted a picture of Fusag as a genuine, powerful fighting force, but one that was still consolidating, still preparing, and crucially, not yet ready for the cross-channel assault. This meant carefully calibrating the timing of his intelligence, subtly delaying the readiness of Fusag while continuously emphasizing its immense power. The German High Command desperately wanted to believe the invasion would come at Pas de Calais, the shortest route across the channel. Garbo provided them with the justification for that belief. He played directly into their expectations, reinforcing their preconceived notions rather than trying to counter them head-on. This historical irony, where the enemy's own hopes become their downfall, was a cornerstone of fortitude. As June 1944 approached, the tension became almost unbearable. On June 5th, the night before D-Day, Garbo sent his final pre-invasion report to the Germans. He warned them that a massive invasion was imminent, but crucially, he hinted that the Pas de Calais landings would be the main event, following a diversionary attack. He carefully avoided giving away the actual location, yet confirmed the overall imminent nature of the attack, creating both urgency and misdirection. This was the pinnacle of his art. Then came the dawn of June 6th. The first waves of Allied troops hit the beaches of Normandy. From Omaha Beach to Sword Beach, an unprecedented force began to pour ashore, facing brutal German resistance. Hitler and his generals immediately received reports of the landings, but instead of reacting with full force, they hesitated. They held back their armored divisions, the Panzer Reserves, which were positioned hundreds of miles away in Pas de Calais. Why? Because they still believed the main event was coming. Garbo's reports were central to this strategic paralysis. Hours after the initial landings at 9:30 a.m. on D-Day, Garbo contacted his German controllers. He claimed his principal agent in Kent had just reported a massive movement of troops and landing craft in the area, indicating the true invasion was about to begin from Pas de Calais. He argued that the Normandy landings were a diversion designed to draw German reserves away from the real target. This report was transmitted with utmost urgency, specifically requested by MI5 to be sent at that precise moment to maximize its impact on German decision-making. The effect was profound. Inside the German High Command, the belief in Fortitude South solidified. Hitler himself, notoriously reliant on his intelligence and often skeptical of his generals, was absolutely convinced. He ordered the elite 15th Army, positioned in Pas de Calais, to remain in place, awaiting Fusag's arrival. Crucially, the powerful 1st SS Panzer Corps, a formidable armored unit, was kept in reserve in the same region, deprived from entering the fray in Normandy. This decision had cataclysmic consequences for the German defense. In the critical first few days and weeks after D-Day, the Allied forces in Normandy faced fierce but manageable resistance. Had the full strength of the German 15th Army and the Panzer divisions been thrown into the battle immediately, the invasion might well have been contained, perhaps even pushed back into the sea. The Normandy landings were a tenuous toehold, and reinforcements were vital. Garbo's deception bought the Allies precious time, allowing them to consolidate their beachheads and establish a logistical base. As the battle for Normandy raged, Garbo continued his performance. He continued to send reports about Fusag's preparations in Kent. He described fictitious large-scale military exercises, the final stages of loading landing craft, the readiness of thousands of aircraft. Even as Allied forces pushed deeper into France, the Germans, particularly Hitler, maintained their delusion. They were so deeply invested in the idea of a second, larger invasion that they refused to acknowledge the reality unfolding before their eyes. This stubborn refusal to adapt, directly fueled by Garbo's reports, became a critical factor in the eventual Allied breakout from Normandy and the rapid advance across France. The 15th Army, consisting of over 200,000 men and significant armor, remained largely static in Pas de Calais for weeks after D-Day, waiting for an enemy that did not exist. By the time the German High Command finally accepted that the Normandy landings were the main event, it was too late. The momentum had shifted irrevocably. The strategic dilemma for the Germans was that they could not afford to dismiss Garbo's intelligence given his track record, but by believing it, they sealed their own fate. The human cost of D-Day was immense. Tens of thousands of Allied soldiers lost their lives on the beaches and in the hedgerows of Normandy. But Garbo's actions, by holding back vital German reserves, undoubtedly saved countless more. His deception was a pivotal factor in minimizing the resistance faced by the invading forces, allowing the Allies to gain a foothold and eventually break out. The accolades for Garbo were as unique as his story. In July 1944, the Germans, still unaware of his true loyalties, awarded Juan Pujol García the Iron Cross, second class, for his outstanding services to the Third Reich. It was presented in absentia, of course, a poignant symbol of their ultimate trust in their most valuable, yet utterly false, agent. Weeks later, in the same year, King George VI of Britain appointed Juan Pujol a member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE, in recognition of his extraordinary contributions to the Allied war effort. It is a singular historical irony that a single man received high honors from both warring sides for his espionage activities, one for saving lives, the other for hastening their defeat. After the war, Garbo's story took another dramatic turn. With his mission accomplished and recognizing the potential danger of reprisals from vengeful Nazi loyalists, Michigan 5 decided to stage his death. In 1949, they declared him to have died of malaria in Angola. His British handler, Thomas Harris, even wrote a letter to Pujol's wife confirming his tragic passing. This elaborate ruse allowed Juan Pujol García to disappear from the world stage to start a new life. Free from the shadows of his extraordinary past, he moved to Venezuela, settling in the city of Lagunillas, where he opened a small gift shop and a cinema. For decades, he lived an anonymous, peaceful life, raising a family. His incredible wartime exploits a closely guarded secret. It was not until 1984, 40 years after D-Day, that his past finally caught up with him. Nigel West, a British historian, became fascinated by the Garbo case and meticulously tracked him down to Venezuela. West's revelations brought Juan Pujol García out of the shadows and allowed his astonishing story to be told to the world. In 1984, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, Garbo traveled to London and then to Normandy. He was greeted as a hero, meeting former MI5 colleagues and even some of the veterans whose lives he had indirectly saved. The bumbling chicken farmer, the amateur spy, had become a legend, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and imagination against the backdrop of global conflict. The story of Juan Pujol Garbo is more than just a thrilling spy tale. It is a profound illustration of the strategic importance of intelligence and counterintelligence in modern warfare. It demonstrates how a carefully constructed deception, executed with meticulous detail and psychological acumen, can profoundly shape the battlefield, not with bullets and bombs, but with carefully crafted lies. Garbo's impact extended far beyond D-Day itself. His success underscored the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated intelligence agencies when confronted with a master of misdirection who understood their biases and exploited their desires. His story also highlights the often overlooked logistical and psychological dimensions of warfare. It wasn't merely about moving tanks and troops, it was about moving minds. The ability to paralyze an enemy's decision-making process, to feed them exactly what they want to hear, to cultivate an unbreakable trust, was arguably as effective as any tank division or air fleet. The industrial capacity of America and Britain was critical. The bravery of the soldiers was undeniable, but the ability of one man to tie down 250,000 German troops through sheer deception was a unique strategic triumph. In the annals of espionage, Juan Pujol García stands alone. He was not a natural-born spy, not a man of violence or cunning in the traditional sense. He was a man driven by moral conviction who chose to fight the war with his imagination. His weapons were paper, ink, and an astonishing ability to conjure entire worlds from thin air. He reminds us that in the grand tapestry of history, the quiet acts of individuals, the unexpected choices of ordinary people, can sometimes weave the most extraordinary and decisive patterns. The chicken farmer who dreamed of defeating Hitler became the double agent Hitler trusted most, and in doing so, changed the course of history, saving countless lives with every fabricated word. His legacy is a powerful testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest battles are won not with overwhelming force, but with the subtle, intricate brilliance of the human mind.